Our reading tells us that when Jesus saw the widow who had now lost her only son, he had compassion for her. It's a very touching story. It challenges us in our attempt to really grasp the depth of the event. We jump quickly from dead son to the miracle of his restoration. We race from the tragedy and pain to the rejoicing. All of us try our best not to put ourselves in the role of the grieving mother in this story. We stay in the crowd, among the bystanders, guarding our hearts against her pain, ready to celebrate when Jesus gives her living son to her. It's only natural. Nobody wants to imagine the pain of losing a child. But it's important for us to force ourselves to think just a bit more about this woman. Her loss is far greater than what we realize. She'd already lost her husband, which made her vulnerable in that society. A woman without a husband had limited resources and limited hope. But she at least had a son, a male, who would be able to secure her place in society and give her hope for her financial security. And then he died, taking away not just her beloved son, but her future as well. Jesus saw her, recognized her overwhelming need, and had compassion for her. He gave her the life of her son, and in doing that, he gave her own life back to her. As Christians, we're called to be imitators of Christ. We're supposed to know Jesus well enough to be able to be Jesus to the people we encounter. We need to offer the same compassion to others as Jesus had for this grieving widow and mother. Remember, though, he didn't just feel sorry for her, and he didn't just say he'd remember her in his prayers, although praying for people is a very important thing that we can do. He took very concrete action. Modeling our own lives after his example, our compassion needs to move us to action. I'm not saying we'll be resurrecting people from the dead, but there are important things we can do. We can allow ourselves to become aware of the needs of others and then mobilize our networks to help meet those needs. We can do more than feel sorry when someone faces a difficult situation. Facebook is a great place to see the best and worst reactions of people. I've seen lots of posts about the 4-year-old who fell into the gorilla enclosure and the gorilla that was killed as a result. Most have been critical of the zoo and the parents. Many have judged the mother very harshly, ridiculing her for her size and accusing her of being too lazy to watch her child. They've shamed her for her body, called into question her care for her son, and have suggested that anyone using her daycare should stop immediately because she must be unfit. Very few have ever admitted to losing control of a small child in public. Very few have acknowledged that some children have an insatiable curiosity and are very quick. Those who have made that point suggested their own solution, a child leash. Speaking from experience, there are children who are difficult to keep close by your side when there are so many wondrous things to see and experience. My own solution was a pair of bracelets with a tether between them, much less obviously a leash than the harness style that some parents use, but still visible enough to solicit angry comments from strangers, accusing me of treating my grandchild like a dog. I guess they'd rather I either let him run wild or that I risked hurting his hand because I had to squeeze it way too tightly in order to keep him close to my side. It's true that child had no business in the enclosure, but it was a very natural thing for him to attempt. Hindsight gives us lots of preventive measures. There's been a huge uproar over the loss of the gorilla. He's been portrayed as a gentle giant with mean job of parenting that boy than the boy's parents. However, experts in gorilla behavior paint a far different picture. They say his actions indicate he was using the boy as a plaything. He was positioning him to be a toy to bat around. People who've made a career of working with gorillas say the boy was in imminent danger of being killed, and that the gorilla showed every sign of rising agitation. Experts say there was no other option at that point than to take the life of the gorilla in order to save the child. So another side also became vocal, the anti-zoo group. They point to this event as an example for why it's wrong to put animals on display for our pleasure. They say if the gorilla had been in its natural habitat, he'd still be alive. Well, that may or may not be true. Endangered species have been saved by being raised in captivity. I don't pretend to know whether zoos are a good thing or are inherently evil. I think they can be a wonderful teaching tool, though, to help us become more aware of our need to care for creation, rather than just using creation for our own selfish gains. Regardless of the perspective we focus on, compassion is missing in this story. Compassion for the family of the boy, compassion for the zoo personnel, and then modeling Jesus, using compassion to motivate us into action to make sure this tragedy never happens again. Back to Facebook. A couple of memes have appeared that attempt to shift our focus of righteous anger toward another, far greater tragedy. One shows a picture of the gorilla and says, "One gorilla killed and everybody's in an uproar, but 3,000 Syrian refugees have drowned seeking refuge and nobody even noticed." And another meme shows refugees in a boat with a caged gorilla on board and a person speaking. Maybe if we bring him along, people will care enough to make sure we are safe. The memes are harsh with their critique of our attitudes toward the growing number of Syrian refugees desperately attempting to find a safe place to live. But in spite of the harshness, the memes are asking us to feel compassion and then to take action. Right now, there are an estimated 4.3 million Syrian refugees, and the number continues to grow. Approximately 50% are children who have lost everything. Europe cannot absorb this many displaced people. This is a global problem that requires a globally coordinated effort. It demands that we act with compassion to help our Syrian sisters and brothers. One more example. Earlier in the week, there was an Amber Alert issued for 13-year-old Deontay Mitchell. He and his cousin were hanging out at a party store on their bikes at 10:30 p.m. when they saw a man drop money. Deontay grabbed the money and the boys took off. The cousin got away, but the man caught Deontay and forced him into his car. The next day, Deontay's body was found in a field in Detroit, and his abductor was arrested in Ohio. And then Facebook. Facebook loves to victim shame. The parents have been shamed because the boys were out late on a school night. The boys have been slammed for being out late, for being at a party store, and for snatching the dropped money. Of course, the man who forced Deontay into a car and presumably killed him is being called all kinds of horrible things. Outrage is a natural reaction to this series of events. But what about adding some compassion? Who will be compassion for the victims in this situation? What will our action be connected to that compassion? Who will be the community for all the future Deontays just waiting for a tragedy to happen to them? Who will be the community for the cousins and friends of the Deontays that are looking for something fun to do? And who will be the community for the families of this murdered child and the murderer? Both families will need support. What will we do our children find more constructive ways to have fun? What will we do to create safe spaces for them? How will we help them to value taking care of themselves, including getting a good night's rest so that they can get the most out of their educational opportunities? How will we support their teachers so that the classrooms are places where kids want to be and where they're engaged in their lessons? Compassion. It's easy to judge. It's easy to say the parents should have done things differently. It's easy to say the boys had no business being out and that Deontay shouldn't have taken the money the man dropped. It's easy to say the man should have handled things differently. Judgment comes easily to our minds, but compassion, that's what's needed most. The compassion of Christ that moves us to take positive action. I don't have answers to the Syrian refugee crisis. I don't know how to make sure no more kids get murdered. I don't know how to stop violence. I don't know how to be a perfect parent or grandparent, let alone how to tell somebody else to be perfect at their parenting. But I am sure that the still speaking God has ideas for us. I'm sure that together, acting as imitators of Christ, we can use compassion to bring positive change. My prayer is that we'll all be moved by the compassion of Jesus to share his healing love in any way that we can. And we be bold enough to step in and speak up when the Spirit moves us. May we be light. May we be loving kindness. May we be compassion that takes action. Amen.